The security officer at the naval base entrance scanned the pass I handed him, then shook his head. "Lieutenant, this credential has been revoked." I didn't flinch. Instead, I pulled out a different card and passed it through the window. "Tell them Major Elena Ward has arrived." The man's eyes widened as he registered the insignia under my name. "My name is Elena Ward. I'm 34, and for the last 11 years, my family has spoken about me as if I never existed. Not literally dead, just erased, socially executed. In their world, that distinction was razor-thin. I wasn't always their shameful secret. In our polished Virginia town, I had once been the dependable middle child. Not the prodigy older sister, Victoria, and not the darling youngest, Claire. I was simply Elena, the one who kept the peace, finished the chores, and stayed out of trouble. Until I didn't. At 22, I made a choice my family could never forgive. It wasn't reckless. It was simple. I chose love. In return, they chose exile. For more than a decade, my name was scrubbed from their holidays, their milestones, their conversations. No Christmas cards, no birthday wishes, no seat at weddings or graduations. They built their shining reputations inside their elite social bubble while I disappeared, becoming someone unrecognizable to them, someone they never even tried to understand. When your bloodline disowns you, you either collapse under the weight or you break free. For me, it was freedom. Freedom to become the soldier, the leader, the woman I was always meant to be. The invitation appeared on a Tuesday, slid under my apartment door like contraband. Heavy ivory stock, embossed in gold. My hands trembled as I read the words. "Victoria Elizabeth Ward and Commander Jonathan Ashford 3 request the honor of your presence." My sister was getting married. The same brilliant, flawless sister whose last words to me 11 years earlier had been, "Pathetic little traitor." Inside, tucked neatly, was a handwritten note in her perfect script. "Lena, I know it's been a long time, but family is family. Mom says you're still in DC, hope you'll come. V." I nearly laughed out loud. Family is family. Easy to say after banishing me for over a decade. What happened back then wasn't some trivial sibling squabble. At 22, I had fallen hard for Daniel Ross, a Navy pilot training with my father's unit. He was grounded, kind, and made me feel seen in a way no one ever had. But Victoria had noticed him first. She brought him to a family cookout, parading him like a trophy. But his eyes weren't on her. We spent the evening trading stories about deployments and music, and by the time the night ended, we had exchanged numbers. I should have told her. I should have been honest about our first coffee, our second, about how quickly we were falling for each other. Instead, afraid of the storm she'd unleash, I stayed silent. 3 months later, when she heard from a mutual friend, she erupted. She accused me of betrayal, of jealousy, of sabotaging her happiness on purpose. "You've always been jealous," Victoria screamed, her voice sharp enough to rattle the walls. "Always trying to take what belongs to me because you can't stand that I outshine you." Our mother tried to intervene, murmuring something about calming down, but Victoria cut her off, eyes blazing. She knew I liked him. She knew, and she went after him anyway. "As far as I'm concerned, she's dead to me." Then came the ultimatum directed squarely at our parents. "It's her or me. I won't share a family with someone who betrays her own sister." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother stared at the rug. My father, the seasoned naval officer who always had words in high-stakes situations, cleared his throat but said nothing. And Claire, just 16 then, sat frozen, her expression carved from shock. "Victoria," I whispered. "He never even knew you were interested. You called him a friend." "Liar," she spat. That's when my mother sealed my fate. "Elena, maybe it would be best if you stayed away for a while. Let things cool down." A while became forever. Daniel and I endured the storm together. We moved across the country, married in a quiet ceremony with his family and our closest friends, and carved out a life far from the Ward family's orbit. Now, holding that wedding invitation, I felt a cold determination settle in my chest. Victoria was curating her picture-perfect celebration, surrounded by the family who had chosen her. She didn't want me there out of love, she wanted me as a prop, a token of her so-called forgiveness. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I still knew by heart. "Ross and Partners Aviation Law," the receptionist answered. "This is Elena Ross," I said calmly. "Could you put me through to my husband?" It was time my family understood exactly who they had cast aside. The next few weeks became an exercise in digital reconnaissance. I dug into the ghost of the life they had erased me from. Victoria's social media was a glossy feed of polished perfection. Charity galas, medals for community service, ski trips in the Alps, engagement photos on the Chesapeake Bay. Every post flooded with likes and glowing comments. I scrolled through years of holidays, birthdays, and vacations. My name? Never mentioned. It was as though I had been scrubbed out entirely. The wedding hashtag Victoria finds her captain, was already buzzing. I tapped through photo after photo. Engagement parties, bridal showers, bachelorette weekends in Napa. The same faces reappeared. Mom with her pearls, Dad in his crisp blazer, and Claire, now grown and radiant, smiling beside their country club circle. One post from the previous Christmas froze me in place. The whole family stood together around a towering tree, captioned, 3 generations of Wards celebrating another blessed year. A family friend had commented, "You're so lucky to have such wonderful daughters." Daughters. Plural. As though there were only 2. That's when I decided to call Claire. At 27, she was married to a hedge fund manager and living in Manhattan. She had never blocked my number, but she'd never once used it either. Elena. Her voice was thin, startled. "Oh my God, is everything okay?" "I got Victoria's wedding invitation," I said flatly. I wasn't even sure it was real. A long sigh came through the line. "Look, I pushed her to invite you. I know things were ugly, but it's been 11 years. Ugly." I cut in. "Claire, they erased me because I dated a man Victoria barely knew." "It was more complicated than that," she said quickly, her tone bristling. "You know how she felt about Daniel." "She felt nothing," I snapped. "He was a friend she paraded once." And what? I was supposed to ask her permission to fall in love. The silence was heavy. "You don't remember Dad telling me not to come home for Christmas? Or Mom changing the locks?" "They changed the locks because you had a copy made for Daniel," she shot back. "And Dad was just trying to keep the peace." "Until I disappeared," I muttered. The line went quiet again before she finally spoke, her voice softer now. "Elena, I missed you. I really did. But Victoria, she was so hurt. Mom and Dad thought it was better if she could heal without seeing you." "A reminder," I said bitterly. "That's all I was. Not a daughter. Not a sister. Just a scar they wanted to cover up." "So why now?" I asked after a pause. "Why the sudden invitation?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She's happy now. Jonathan checks all the boxes. Wealthy family, Harvard Law, the whole pedigree. He said maybe it was time to forgive and forget. To show everyone how magnanimous she's become." This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about optics. I was to be paraded as the wayward sister, redeemed by the gracious, enlightened bride. After I hung up, I sat in my home office, staring at the wall of medals, commendations, and certifications I had earned over the past decade. Daniel found me there an hour later. "Rough call?" he asked gently. I told him everything. "You know what hurts most? Is it my voice thick? It's not just that they chose her. It's that it was so easy for them, like I was disposable." He took my hands firmly. "Elena, you don't have to go. You don't owe them a thing." "I know," I said, steadying myself. "But I want to. Not for them. For me. I want them to see who they threw away." That night, I sat down and wrote a list of everything I had achieved since my exile. It was long. I wasn't just preparing to attend a wedding. I was preparing to make a statement. What my family couldn't possibly imagine was who I had become during those 11 years. While Victoria climbed the ladder at our father's firm and Claire played perfect housewife in Manhattan, I was quietly building a legacy of my own. When my name was poisoned back in Virginia and no one would hire me, Daniel's father, an aviation contractor in Portland, offered me a role managing client operations. I took it, and within 2 years I had doubled their contracts. That's where I met Sarah Monroe, a razor-sharp defense consultant who saw in me what I hadn't yet recognized in myself. Over coffee one afternoon, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're wasted here. You should be running your own command." She became my mentor, then my partner. Together we launched Monroe Ward Strategies, a crisis management and restructuring firm that took on failing corporations, military contractors in scandal, even politicians in disgrace, and rebuilt them stronger. We expanded fast, coast to coast, then international. The cards in my purse simply read, Major Elena Ward, senior partner. But the letterhead told the truth of who I had become. Our firm's last fiscal year had closed at $47 million in revenue. I'd also kept tabs on my family, not from spite but out of instinct. In my world, intelligence is survival. I knew about my father's mounting debts at the casino, the IRS probe into my mother's charity that had mysteriously disappeared, and Victoria's affair with a senior partner at the firm. I never intended to wield the information, but I kept it. Knowledge is leverage, and leverage was something I had in abundance. As the RSVP deadline crept closer, Claire's texts grew more insistent. Just checking if you got the invite. Then Victoria's really hoping you'll come. And finally, Mom wants to know about dietary restrictions. I ignored them all. Instead, I called my private investigator, Marcus. I need a full workup on the Ashford family, I told him. Especially Jonathan Ashford III. Marcus delivered quickly. The Ashfords were ancient money, their fortune wrapped in ironclad trusts. Jonathan's inheritance was vast, but it came with a morality clause. One scandal, one whiff of impropriety, and he'd be stripped of it all. This family doesn't just have skeletons, Marcus said. They've got an entire graveyard locked up. Perfect, I replied. The night before my flight, Daniel wrapped his arms around me. You don't have to prove anything to them, he said quietly. This isn't about proving anything, I answered. This is about showing them the truth. When I packed, I brought 3 things. The ornate wedding invitation, Marcus's dossier on the Ashfords, and our firm's latest annual report. Sometimes the sharpest revenge isn't confrontation. It's arriving with the receipts. The Arlington Officers Club looked exactly as it had the last time I'd seen it. A temple to old money, restraint, and military prestige. I handed my keys to the valet and strode inside. The first person I saw was Claire. Her expression flickered from shock to relief, then to unease. Elena, you came. She rushed forward, hugging me tighter than she probably meant to. You look incredible. I did. I had chosen a midnight blue silk dress that whispered power, accented with understated jewelry that caught the light just enough. Where are Mom and Dad? I asked evenly. Dad's with the groomsmen. Mom's helping Victoria get ready. Elena Ward. The voice belonged to Jonathan Ashford III. He was the picture of pedigree. Square jaw, immaculate suit, a smile polished from years of prep schools and yacht clubs. Victoria mentioned you might show, he said, his grin stiffening at the edges. She's a little nervous. I imagine she is, I replied coolly. Look, he said, lowering his tone, today's about fresh starts. I hope you can keep that in mind. Before I could answer, I heard it, my mother's voice slicing across the room. Elena Marie Ward. She stood in the doorway, chin lifted like a commander reviewing her troops. The cocktail chatter dimmed instantly. Hello, Mother. She walked toward me, her smile strained but practiced. You look well. Washington must be treating you kindly. It does, I said. My father appeared behind her, his face flushed. Well, the prodigal daughter returns. And then I saw her. Victoria stood at the top of the sweeping staircase, draped in white silk. Her bouquet trembled as she froze, staring at me. Slowly, deliberately, she descended, each step measured like it was choreographed. When she reached the bottom, we faced each other for the first time in over a decade. Elena, she whispered. Hello, Victoria. I smiled faintly. You look beautiful. Thank you for coming, she murmured. The tension between us was suffocating, so thick it felt like the entire hall was holding its breath. That's when Jonathan's father, Colonel Jonathan Ashford Jr., a man whose very presence demanded attention, strode into our tense little circle. Victoria, darling, he said warmly, aren't you going to introduce us to your sister? Victoria froze for a heartbeat, then forced a brittle smile. Of course, this is my sister, Elena. A pleasure, the colonel said, extending his hand. Jonathan Ashford Sr., are you in the service as well? Or law, perhaps? This was it, the moment that brought 11 years of silence and survival to a head. Actually, I said clearly, my voice even and strong, I'm in crisis management. I co-founded and run a consulting firm. Reputation defense, corporate restructuring, strategic recovery, that kind of work. His eyes narrowed with interest. What's the firm's name? Monroe Ward Strategies. The name landed like a detonation. Color drained from the colonel's face, and I saw flickers of recognition ripple across the room. He knew the name. "You're Elena Ward," he said slowly, connecting the dots. "The one who handled the Titan aerospace fallout." "Among others," I confirmed with a small nod. The silence that followed was absolute. My family looked at me as though I'd suddenly grown into someone unrecognizable. "Elena," Victoria whispered, her bouquet trembling. "What are you saying?" I pulled a business card from my clutch and handed it to the colonel, turning slightly so the rest of the gathering could hear. "I'm saying that the daughter you cast aside 11 years ago built a $47 million enterprise. And now everyone here knows exactly what you lost." The rest of the evening blurred into hushed whispers and sidelong glances. I watched my parents scramble to invent some palatable narrative for their friends. A way to explain their forgotten daughter who had somehow risen into power on her own. During the reception, Colonel Ashford sought me out privately. "Major Ward," he said gravely, "I have to ask, would you consider consulting for the Ashford Foundation?" "I'd be happy to have my office send you an information packet," I replied smoothly. By the end of the night, I'd distributed over a dozen business cards. As I was preparing to leave, Claire caught my arm, tears in her eyes. "Elena, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." "That's the point, Claire," I said gently but firmly. "You never knew because you never cared enough to look." "Will you stay in touch now?" she asked, voice trembling. I studied her face, older now but softened with genuine regret. "That depends," I told her. "Do you want a real relationship or just bragging rights?" Her voice cracked. "I want to know you. The real you." "Then call me," I said, squeezing her hand. "Call me because you miss your sister, not because you finally realize I'm worth knowing." Driving away from the officers' club, I felt something heavy fall away, a burden I hadn't realized I'd carried for more than a decade. I hadn't come seeking apologies. I hadn't come begging for approval. I had come to show them exactly who I had become, on my own terms. Mission accomplished.